Good morning, everyone. My name is Allie Dunn, and I will be your host, moderator, and facilitator, at least for this first part of this Day 2 event. So welcome to the 28th Annual California Aquatic Bioassessment Workgroup meeting, or CABW, and the 9th Annual California Chapter of Society for Freshwater Science meeting. We've been doing this joint effort for the last almost 10 years with Angela and John and others at CalSFS. So just wanted to start by thanking them, and I'll be handing this off to Angela in just a few minutes to give her welcome from their end of things too. Okay, so before we really kind of dive into the event today, I wanted to take a few moments to kind of run through and acknowledge the land that the State Water Resources Control Board office is located on. We're here in Sacramento at the Cal EPA building. And this land was and still is a gathering place for many local tribes who've lived throughout the Central Valley and throughout the foothills for generations. And they were really the original stewards of this land. So just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that. These people included the Nishinan, Maidu, Miwok people, and the Patwin-Wintun nations. And they've remained committed to the stewardship of this land over many centuries. And it's important for us to acknowledge that our organization sits on the tribal lands of Sacramento's indigenous people. We also recognize that we're here because of the sacrifices that we forced upon them. And in remembering these communities, we honor their legacy, their lives, and their descendants. So thank you. Okay, so as far as CABW, there's probably new people to this meeting, so just briefly wanted to touch on who we are and what the purpose is. So generally, this has been going on for almost 30 years with kind of a three-prong approach, all interrelated, which is to share current freshwater science research and management, to network and build partnerships, and to support science-based policy and natural resource management for the protection and restoration of California's freshwater aquatic ecosystems. So that second piece really of networking and building partnerships, that's a big component of CABW. Historically, we all get together. There's cold beverages that are had at the after hours. And that piece we're missing, right? Because it's all virtual this year as it was last year. And so, I think we're all feeling that, and hopefully by next year we can get back to in-person kind of run a show. That said, we are completely virtual this year. So please be patient with us if we run into any technical issues, or if we run into any technical issues, and we will try and address those as quickly as we can. If you do run into any issues, you can contact the SWAMP email, and the email is there. If you want to jot that down really quickly, it's also in the slides, but it's swamp@waterboards.ca.gov. And again, just thank you all for your patience and working through us through these crazy, weird, remote times. And like I said, hopefully next year we can all see each other again and not be computer screen faces. Just going to run through some housekeeping with the Zoom webinar protocols. So what's nice about the Zoom webinar is that it allows us to accommodate a larger audience. That said, we have disabled Zoom chat and the video and audio for attendees. However, there is a Q&A option. So we'll go through our talks later in the day or later this morning. And at the end of each talk, you can select that Q&A icon under your chat options. It's at the bottom of your screen in those controls. And there you can submit questions to us, and we have folks that will read those questions to the speakers. And again, any technical issues that come up, logistical issues, etc., please email swamp@waterboards.ca.gov. All right, so before I hand it off to Angela, I just wanted to kind of give a quick run through of what we have lined up for this first day of CABW. Angela will welcome from CalSFS, and we have our keynote speaker, Anecita Agustinez with DWR here to kind of kick things off. And then we've got our first session, just a couple of speakers. We'll take a quick break, roll into our second session, take our break for lunch, and that also It's also the CalSFS business meeting, which Angela will talk to. And then we just have one last session of the CABW portion of the meeting in the afternoon. I'll kind of wrap things up from there, but then please remember we have a virtual poster session, which Angela, again, will talk about through CalSFS. And so Angela, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, and happy to run through slides if that's easiest.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. You can hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
All right, so let's go to the next slide. Thank you. So my name is Angela Diploma Dow. I am the California Society for Freshwater Science Chapter President Chair. And on behalf of myself and our Treasurer Secretary, John Olson, thank you so much, Allie. Hi, John. There he is. Thanks. And we're so grateful again to be part of the CABW this year. This is a great partnership, and I hope it lasts for a long time. It's been great to be able to be part of this work group annual meeting for the last almost 10 years. Next year will be our 10th meeting, so I'm really excited. Hopefully we'll be in person so we can party. Okay, next slide. And then a big thank you again to the team, Ali, Shuka, and Anna at CABW for helping us put this together. And I do want to give a shout out to our CalSFS team, Christina Perisic and Ryan Peak for helping with the website. So we have a new website this year. We'll put the link in the chat for folks. And all the posters for the poster session later today are going to be posted there forever. We also have the posters from the last couple of meetings are up there as well. And a big shout out to our this year's 2021 CalSFS Fellows. This is our very first program of fellows. We have 5 fellows this year that got funding from the SFS, that's the Parent Society Long Range Planning Committee, to be fellows, and they've given back to CalSFS in great ways, and we're hoping to establish this long relationship with these fellows with the chapter as well as CABW. And also thanks to SFSS, our parent organization. And then all the students that submitted posters. We have 9 posters this year. It's great. And they'll be at the poster competition today at 2 p.m. And then tomorrow we have some tribal ecological knowledge panelists and a special session. And that'll be at 1 p.m. tomorrow. And thank you so much to all the panelists that are participating in that. I'm just so excited for that session and can't wait for tomorrow. Next slide, please, Allie. And so I thanked everybody, and we really just want to acknowledge the original freshwater scientists of California, and the First Nation inhabitants of the state. They lived, they worked with the land, with the water systems for thousands of years, without degrading systems, without allowing species to go extinct. And I really just want to, directly acknowledge them and thank them for leaving us these resources. And we really want to make sure that we're protecting and preserving them going into the future. You can click, Allie. I want to shout out to a system that I work in. So I work in Clear Lake. It's not to scale there, but I wanted to show you where it is in Pomo Land. Click, Allie. Thank you. And so Clear Lake is located in Lake County in Northern California. And we're just really appreciative for the original caretakers that are still there working the stewardship of the land and partnering with us and partnering in my work. And I'm just really thankful to be able to work in this wonderful, beautiful system. And so I acknowledge them and give thanks. And I've been doing some research, and one of the original names of Clear Lake, Hobbiton, which actually means big water or large water, which I think is a more apt name than Clear Lake. And if you're interested in about this system, we do have a special session panelist tomorrow. Sarah Ryan will be talking about the tule boats of Clear Lake, and here's some photos there of tule boats in the past and the present. I'm really excited for that session tomorrow at 2. And to the next slide, Allie. So let's just step back and talk about the purpose of the Society for Freshwater Science: to promote further understanding freshwater ecosystems and ecosystems at the interface between aquatic terrestrial habitats. And one of the goals of the Society for Freshwater Science is to foster the exchange of information among membership and other societies in the organization. And we believe this really aligns, working with CABW aligns with this message here to foster exchange of information. Next slide. So I just have 2 more slides. If you need to find out more information, we do have an annual newsletter, and we usually send them out about December, January, and we cover some things from this meeting, as well as highlight stuff that's been going on in our chapter with our students and some of our early careers and some of our researchers. We also have a social media. You can follow us on Twitter at CalSFS Social, and a really great shout out. Thanks to Christine for managing that Twitter throughout this meeting, as well as throughout the rest of the year. Next slide, please. And we do a brand new website, and we'll put that in the chat for everybody. And if you want to learn more about what we're doing and have any questions, you can attend the business meeting today at 11:45. We'll talk about our accomplishments and some other things that we have on the horizon for the next year. And then again, the posters will be today at 2 p.m. These are some great posters. We have some knockout students that put together some great research and management that's captured here in this poster session. And then tomorrow at 1, of course, our special session panel for our TEK. Thank you. Next slide. And this is all I have. So if you have any questions, you can email us at cal.chap.sfs@gmail.com. And if you want to support CalSFS and you are a member, or you just want to support us and future students, you can donate directly to us via Venmo, and that is the Venmo account right there, and that goes to our treasurer secretary. And again, thank you so much to Swamp and the Water Board for partnering with us, and we're really excited about today's meeting, and we hope everybody enjoys it. Thank you so much, Allie. Back to you.
Thanks, Angela. And yeah, the feeling is mutual. I think, as we move on year after year with CABW, it's awesome to have SFS involved with all the young freshwater scientists, and they're amazing. I mean, it's incredible the work that you all are doing. So thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much.
Sure. All right. So to kind of kick things off today, we've invited and are honored to have Anecita Agustinez, the Tribal Policy Advisor with DWR, to provide our keynote speech. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Anecita, and then Anecita, I'll turn it over to you. And then following Anecita's talk, we'll have some time for questions and answers and some discussion. So kind of be thinking about that as Anecita is chatting with you today. So Anecita, like I mentioned, we are so honored to have you here. She is with the Department of Water Resources, so sister agency to the State Water Board. Anecita was appointed by the Department of Water Resources as their tribal policy advisor in August of 2013. She does a lot of amazing things. Her primary responsibilities are to provide policy support and recommendations regarding tribal issues to DWR's leadership. She's actively engaged with DWR's various divisions, assisting in tribal consultation and the development of DWR's tribal consultation policy. Before doing all of that, she served as the Native American Liaison and Manager of the Office of Legislative and External Affairs and the Office of Health Access at the Department of Healthcare Services. She previously was Assistant Director of the Office of Native American Affairs at the Department of Justice and the Office of Attorney General. And if you're not already impressed, her experience also includes developing and conducting training in the areas of tribal consultation, cultural competency, environmental justice, social justice issues, and legislative advocacy on behalf of California's tribal governments. So again, so honored to have you here today, Anecita. I think this is going to be awesome to try to connect those dots to the session that we have tomorrow afternoon and the talks that we'll have in between as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Allie. I appreciate that very much. So, Yate, on behalf of the Department of Water Resources, I wish to acknowledge the original inhabitants of the land where we work and reside. DWR's offices are located throughout the state of California, with our headquarters situated at the confluence of the Sacramento and the American Rivers. This is the ancestral land of the Nishinan, Miwok, Maidu, and Patwin peoples who have from time immemorial gathered on the east, the west, the north, and south of these important rivers and stewarded this land. Anecita Agustinez Ginishli, Twodichitni Nishli, Elakana Baishichin. As a Dene, I also wish to say thank you to the ancestral stewards of this land and for this opportunity to speak today. So I am the daughter of a Navajo mother who experienced and survived the boarding school system of the 1940s. And I'm also the daughter of a first-generation Ilocano who immigrated to the Americas in the early 30s. And to you quick math thinkers, there was a 38-year difference between my parents and a beautiful love story to be shared another time. When I was younger, I didn't realize it at the time. I thought I was just being an obedient niece. But during those early summers and winters of my childhood spent visiting my elders on the Navajo reservation, I didn't know it, but I was being taught by my family matriarchy the continuum and practice of traditional survival skills. One of my fondest memories is riding in the back of my uncle's pickup truck to the nearest trading post to fill up empty water tanks. Since then and to this date, there are very few community members with access to water, running water, and electricity. And at the trading post, we would park next to the water tank that serviced our community. And I felt that I graduated in stature when my cousins allowed me to suck on the hose to get the water flowing. This water was used for our crops and general daily use. I was being taught how to dry farm the cornfields and squash crop. So in the spring, we planted the corn and squash seeds, not in the custom straight rows I was familiar with, but the seeds were planted in pods to ensure their survival over the course of the hot, dry summers of the high desert. And these seedlings were dependent upon the monsoons and intermittent hand watering. The corn crop is one of the most important crops for the Navajo. It has ensured our resiliency and survival over many, many centuries. As Tribal Policy Advisor to the Department of Water Resources, I have the pleasure of working with California's tribal citizens and tribal governments from throughout the state concerning the many programs and projects that DWR is responsible for. We are responsible for maintaining the country's largest water infrastructure project and building the single tunnel conveyance project and the maintenance and operation of the various dams and hydro facilities along the state project delivery system. DWR administers several grant programs, and each of these grant programs and projects must consider the status of tribal governments as sovereign entities in our efforts to conduct proper community tribal engagement. So during the course of these next 2 days, you'll be hearing from your colleagues and statewide experts and tribal cultural keepers on various topics, recognizing the importance of incorporating tribal ecological knowledge into state policy as a sustainable practice. Tribal participation in your academic research and in development of program implementation is essential in working toward ensuring careful stewardship of our increasingly scarce ecological resources. There are many definitions, very different definitions of TEK. I'm not aware of any universal definition. In fact, there are various terms besides traditional ecological knowledge, such as indigenous knowledge and indigenous science, indigenous environmental knowledge, traditional science, and my personal preferences are tribal knowledge or tribal knowledge systems. Tribal ecological knowledge is a knowledge and practice that is handed down through generations, and it is a practice that develops a deep understanding of how to manage the resources within that landscape. My early example of corn planting on my reservation is a practice that continues to this day, and I'm proud that my 3 granddaughters recently shared that despite the extreme drought conditions in northern Arizona, their cornfield survived and they had a successful harvest. So my understanding of traditional ecological knowledge is knowledge that is passed down from one generation to the next. It is the way we interact with our land, the way we protect our natural environment to conduct ceremonies. It is our dependency on our natural environment. You cannot really separate the land from indigenous people. In fact, the way we describe ourselves through our names means the people of the land or the people of the water. TEK is collaborative. It's a collaboration through various spaces, such as traditional, cultural, and scientific space. In a traditional knowledge system, one will take into consideration community traditions, practices, and moral values, and combine that with the community's worldview in relationship to the land and environment. There is the reliance on generational knowledge as these rituals, practices, stories, and legends are passed down through cultural practitioners and wisdom keepers. To be a modern TEK practitioner, it means collaboration with our non-native allies. If you are a non-native ally, do not fall into the trap that works in one tribal space, thinking that what works in one tribal space will work in another. Knowledge is based upon the land and the space. It is through collaboration that you gain a better understanding of tribal land use and TEK. Keep in mind that there are over 200 California tribes encompassing many types of environments, that have practiced this generational knowledge since time immemorial. Tribal ecological knowledge is being recognized as a scientific practice, and traditional practitioner of tribal ecological knowledge are also being recognized rightfully as cultural keepers and climate science and environmental science professionals. As we develop collaboration and partnerships, I urge you to recognize the environmental and ecological destruction through the policies and practice of California state government that displaced Native Americans. This displacement caused many tribes to be forcibly removed from their ancestral lands, yet despite this displacement, their knowledge has remained. Our current state policies are increasingly recognizing TEK as a cultural practice, and it is being incorporated into state policies. The challenge will be implementation, understanding, and incorporation to protect cultural, history, biodiversity, landscape, and traditional knowledge systems. It's important for non-Native allies and scientists to keep in mind that tribal knowledge can be co-opted by non-Indigenous researchers and their institutions. I believe tribal people feel this threat to their knowledge and information may be lost. Tribal sovereignty must be respected by recognizing the need for free, prior, and informed consent. Tribes should be involved from the beginning in order for consent to be discussed before tribal knowledge systems is accessed or information exchange. Please recognize that tribes have a right not to participate, which brings in dialogue concerning intellectual property and data collection. Few protections exist to protect this knowledge from the public domain and to ensure that tribal knowledge remains the right and property of the people. The risks are misuse and misappropriation that will impact cultural resources. Other risks are culturally inappropriate uses, the lack or loss of benefit sharing, such as what is the benefit to a tribe who chooses to share information? And finally, the avoidance of over-exploitation of scarce resources. So to grantors and institutions, your agencies need an ongoing relationship, training, directions, and guidance to ensure these protections. Discuss in advance what is confidential and how is that information to be protected. Recognize the role and value of different knowledge systems and incorporate into policies the policies of rights of nature and rights of rivers, plants, and other ecosystems. And consider what is the benefit to a tribe when data is collected during the grant process or through a state or federally funded project. What considerations are being made to presume ownership? Is the knowledge under the project, the institution, the individual researcher, or the author that is publishing that information? What is the benefit to the tribe or tribal practitioner for sharing this information? I would like to leave you with this final thought. Recognize the sovereign rights of Indigenous people to control access to and use of their traditional knowledge and their right to participate, give access or deny access based on their own tradition and processes, and consider how you implement the protections of this knowledge that is a gift from the Creator to Indigenous people. I wish you all an extremely productive 2-day sessions, and I wish you all the knowledge and wisdom through your partnerships and collaborations. And I've already seen that you have an impressive agenda to cover. Hefe, thank you for the honor to share these thoughts with you this morning.
Thank you so much, Anecita. I have a few questions that I was kind of thinking through as you spoke today, but I'd like to turn it over to our Q&A to see if folks, any of our participants had questions for Anecita at this time.
Yeah, but people are thinking, typing.
Okay. Yeah. So Anecita, being another agency person, I wonder, and maybe DWR has kind of gone this route, but how, we have our office that does a really great job at working with tribal liaisons in our Office of Public Participation. But is there a way to kind of create maybe a statewide, so like to truly integrate traditional ecological knowledge or indigenous knowledge for an agency to take that on and say, it's a priority for us, it's important, we're going to move forward with that? And how would you do that in a thoughtful way? Like you mentioned, there are over 200 tribes, so it's not just like an easy, we wrote it into a policy, therefore it's going to work and everyone's going to be on board. So what are some ways that from an agency perspective that you could kind of approach that, and does a formal integration into policy make sense?
Yeah, that's a really great thought in terms of what we need to do as agency. I definitely think that formal integration into policies is most important. We have executive orders that exist, but unless those are codified by a statute or other types of mandatory language, it could get lost. And there could be administrative shifts. And we've seen that, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, extreme shifts based on just federal mandates or state mandates. Governor Newsom in 2019 set forth an ancestral lands policy. And I believe that actually that was 2020. And his statement on ancestral lands, which states that state agencies need to incorporate traditional ecological knowledge into state policy and planning in working with tribal governments. That's a start, but that's an administrative policy right now. And if legislation can pick up upon that kind of knowledge sharing and have that part of it, and what I mentioned earlier about the grant process, as we develop grants, and I know State Water Resources Control Board is a great partner in developing lots of grants, even with DWR on habitat restoration, utilizing TEK knowledge. If we can, step back and make sure through our guidelines and regulations, not only are tribes should be direct recipients and make the hurdles easier for tribes to receive the funding to do their own research, but also the protections I mentioned that fall under data collection and intellectual property. I think that's another strong area that's going to be an opportunity for tribes to really help develop some guidelines. But I think that would be a fantastic start.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And then just kind of thinking of, we've got agency people on the call or on the Zoom webinar, but there's also a lot of new scientists or, scientists in school and going through that whole process through universities, et cetera. And I know for me personally, I went to CSU Sacramento here locally and went through their habitat conservation program. And at the time, they didn't have really they didn't touch on indigenous knowledge at all, really. And I wonder if you have any experience with that, if there are maybe ways to get young scientists more connected with the land through universities and through kind of our academic institutions, and what your thoughts are there on that.
I'm seeing more and more, especially, Sacramento State, UC Davis, and some of the other Cal State systems. The universities are being a little bit more proactive through their Native American Studies program, and not having that be siloed as a liberal arts area, but also utilizing that as foundational for some of the science-based programs. I think that's, something there that needs to be coordinated statewide through that. I mean, we're seeing, and today, yesterday and today it's being Indigenous Peoples Day. We're seeing, lots of legislation dealing with curriculum, mainly starting, with the K through 12 curriculum. But I think that curriculum starting there will obviously translate up, to post-12 into undergrad and graduate programs. And I think there's going to be some good collaboration there within that academic research. I think understanding, California's history As scientists, mainly probably going into a scientific path, some may not have the liberal arts studies opportunities, but you cannot take a look at any kind of environmental landscape view without understanding what I mentioned earlier about ecological destruction, environmental destruction, and its impact on Native American people, and that's state policies. And so they have to go hand in hand if you're doing anything along land and water in California regarding what those policies have done to Native American tribes.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to hear that CSUs and universities are starting to kind of cross over a little bit more and integrate some of that into the scientific programs, because I'm kind of feeling that, especially lately, that there is somewhat of a disconnect sometimes between the people and the land, right? And just learning more from those that have lived by the land for centuries. I think that's one way to really raise up next generations of true stewards of our land and water resources. And what better way than through not just colleges, but like you said, get them while they're young, K through 12, and well, 12's, you're getting kind of old there, but you go, for the younger folks to really get them excited about the land and understanding it. And I'm just going to check over. Do we have any other questions? Or I'm happy to keep asking because I've got lots to chat with Anecita about.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. And so we kind of talked a little bit about the, young scientists and academia world. Going back to an agency perspective, I'm familiar with our work through our monitoring programs, how to connect with our Office of Public Participation and Tribal Affairs there. Is that something similar with DWR, where if you're new to agency and you're starting on a grant project and want to be working with a local tribe or what have you, how do you go about that is it just an email, or what are some of the resources, I guess, if I put it another way, for agency folks to work with tribes?
Well, I like to start at, if it's a funding project or program, number one is, where's the money coming from? Obviously, through a state agency, this is coming from legislation mandated through our agencies. So we have to create guidelines and regulations for that. And I really would like to see guidelines really set forth, tribes in specifics versus what we see now is tribes being on the same sentence as underrepresented communities and tribal governments versus, and then the term itself of the word stakeholders. We're stepping away from the term stakeholders in our department, also as being kind of it is a racist term, and it's a colonized term that when you're talking about engaging the public, utilizing the term stakeholder, that comes from the doctrine of discovery, planting a flag, creating boundaries on land that already belonged to people, and even in the gold rush experience of what was done to the colonization process in California. And so we're trying to use language like communities of interest, partnerships, communities, because what does stakeholders even mean? And it's agencies have utilized, we're going to reach out to stakeholders, and it becomes kind of like, the equivalent of the Wall Street blue ribbon panel. It's the same kind of, big eaters, we call them. That come to the table versus, and it's an easy way to say, we're going to reach out to our typical usual suspects. And already that's a narrow viewpoint. And so we take away just how we look at stakeholders in general, even the terminology, and talk about communities. And then we develop who is the communities that we need to engage with. And we take out language that have not been inclusive in terms of how we reach out to underrepresented and underserved communities that have not traditionally been a part of that process or part of that outreach. And then I think that obviously guidelines of how then do you interact with these communities. And make sure, because when it comes to stakeholders, it never recognizes that tribes are not a stakeholder, they're tribal sovereigns, and that they should be treated separately, even amongst the communities and other partnerships on that government to government basis. And I think that we're just starting to understand that through our literature, the websites we have on agencies' pages. We always try to make sure that we have a tribal tab that shows our government-to-government relationship building process, that there's information there specific to tribal governments on any of the programs that we do. So those are just some general first steps and as you create these partnerships, but I think that really starting from language is super important. And that's something that we're trying to do at our department.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work I think that we still have left to do. And, within the water boards, there's a similar movement too, and a lot of training that's happening, which I've been at the water boards for about 10 years too, and just seeing more and more of that and kind of changing our terminology too, I think is critical to that. So thank you, Anecita. It's we're about at our time, but I want to thank you again for your time. This was an excellent discussion with you, and hopefully I have more I want to talk to you about. So I'll be following up just to talk a little bit more about some of these biological monitoring programs and how we can do better within SWAMP to work with and support the tribes throughout the state. So thank you so much. And if folks have questions for you, I think they may be emailing you. So be aware of that.
Not a problem. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.